Welcome to this edition of Fuel for Thought. I'm Kristen Balasia, Head of Automotive Advisory at IHS Markit. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues, James Martin, Associate Director of Automotive Advisory, Mark Hazel, Product Manager, Commercial Vehicle Market Reporting, and Greg Genette, Senior Research Analyst. Our topic today is centered around the light commercial vehicle, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles, and specifically the growth and evolution the segment is experiencing. They're certainly not immune to the challenges, regulatory environment that it's experienced by maybe the more often talked about light vehicle or passenger car and truck segments, but do also have some unique opportunities. So James, let's start with you. What's driving the growth and transition in this sector, and how is this different or maybe similar to the passenger vehicle market?
Hi, Kristen. Thanks for the question. There's a number of factors that are driving the growth of electric vehicles, especially in the light commercial vehicle segments. Oddly enough, one of those drivers is the recent and current pandemic that we've been experiencing. It's forced people to stay at home and to get used to ordering products from home. So it's basically spurred a growth in e-commerce. Even though now we're seeing that restrictions are lifting and people are able to spend more time away from home, that acceleration of e-commerce hasn't really subsided much. So there's still a lot of online ordering and so a lot of online delivery required. And that's driving the need for what we call last mile solutions, those vehicles that bring the product directly to the consumer's home. So we're seeing growth in those areas, and we're seeing a lot of new companies come into the market. And the interesting thing there is these newcomers are coming in with electric vehicles, and they're preparing for dealing with one of the other factors that we're seeing, and that's the global move towards carbon neutrality. And one of the things that's required to get to carbon neutrality is reduction of carbon emissions from vehicles. So by providing electric vehicles for last mile delivery, you get ahead of that push for carbon neutrality. And even more interesting, when you look at these newcomers, they're able to come to the segment with electric vehicles, and that gives them a bit of an advantage over some of the legacy manufacturers who have to protect their ICE-based vehicles that serve the same purpose. So the newcomers can come in a lot more aggressively. And that actually has resulted in a bit of a boost financially. We just saw during this week one of the newcomers, one of the new electric vehicle suppliers, Rivian, achieve an initial public offering that came in at right around $12 billion, which is actually, placing them at a capitalized value higher than several legacy automakers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this trend of increased shipping, increased interest and investment continue. However, this segment is still really experiencing the same pinch points that, we're seeing in so many areas really across the economy right now. So Mark, why don't we go to talking about how the pandemic, supply chain shortages have, while a growing and high area of focus, have affected registration trends in the heavy-duty commercial vehicle space.
Thanks, Kristen. Obviously, we're in one of the biggest supply chain shortages that the automotive industry has ever seen. However, as we look at our new registrations for commercial vehicles, in the 3 through 8 GVW space, they've still risen 10% over 2018. And likewise, vehicles in operation, so every vehicle on the road in that same GVW space has also increased 9% over the same period. Because of the shortage, the commercial vehicle aftermarket, it's hurting, for parts the same way that everyone else, is looking for chips. However, we're still seeing massive growth in many different aftermarket part categories, including, braking. We're still seeing a 16% rise, electrical, 15% rise in parts, filters 7%, and steering, suspension, and wheel end over 12%.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And as these vehicles stay on the road longer and continue to drive an increase in aftermarket parts demand, this information, it's pretty critical. And I think one thing that I think a lot of people would be interested in, Mark, is understanding what's changed or has something changed that makes this aftermarket insight and tracking information more available, and why is it so critical now?
Absolutely. I think, the biggest thing is we've had the information for a while now, but in the pandemic with the shortage, it's led to, like you said, vehicles being kept for a longer period of time and a massive increase, in the demand for replacement parts. So what we've started doing is we've started taking that vehicles and operation database and we compare that with expert industry analysis to create a product that tracks replacement parts for the aftermarket. So the last point to that question too is, when a truck is down, that operator in that fleet, they're sitting there and losing money. So, the first repair shop that has that part is gonna be the one getting that truck back on the road and, winning business in the end, because in the end they were the hero that, that got that truck on the road. So it makes it even more critical, now more than ever, to, you don't want to be that repair shop that doesn't have the right part or the supplier that's not producing enough parts.
For sure. For sure. So, Greg, what about the medium and heavy commercial vehicles? Are we seeing a transition and similar shift away from ICE engines? So, going back to kind of where we started with James, in line with the findings that we have in our recent LCV study, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, hi Kristen. Thanks for the question. I think we're definitely headed away from ICEs, but we're at more of an earlier stage, I would say. We're seeing OEMs ramp up research and development for electrification and fuel cell vehicles, and I think it's a few years away as these fleets start to test with electric vehicles. But I do want to highlight few key differences versus the LCV sector. So first is that the heavy duty sector was definitely going to leverage fuel cell vehicles more with quicker recharging times and longer ranges. It's definitely something that a lot of OEMs and fleets alike are looking at, and that would be maybe a longer term view. Secondly, I think James said something really interesting on the key e-commerce comment. I definitely think it's changing sort of how the market is for the medium and heavy duty vehicles, but I wouldn't say it's a primary driver of change in terms of electrification. We really see it in two phases. One, the regulatory environment, especially here in the U.S., the Biden administration taking over has really fundamentally changed a lot of industries, including trucking and kind of what we're seeing for the future. And also total cost of ownership. As these vehicles start to get cheaper, as manufacturing of electrification starts to advance and costs come down, that'll allow sort of for a perfect storm, and we can increase the take rates of electrification in this market. So it's to answer your question, I think it's we're definitely at the early stages and we're going to see some uptake versus the LCV, but I think the demand drivers as well as sort of the market dynamics are slightly different. And then if I could keep you or if I could, give a few final comments. Just to sort of illustrate this is that the model count for battery electric and fuel cell vehicles in 2018 was only 20 globally, and that's going to be doubled just this year in 21 and then also in 2022. So that kind of shows that it's sort of uptaking, but we're really going to see more of an increase here in the short term.
Interesting. Great. So this is, in our industry and many of our clients and other folks that may be listening, I think sometimes passenger cars and trucks get the headlines, but this is such an important space we see in our global economy, just logistics, transportation, and really touches so many facets of our lives and of our economy. So I wanted to just go back to, maybe James or Mark also, if you had any other final thoughts about really the challenges, the opportunities, the hurdles that we see in this space that people should be considering.
Sure, I'll take that on. Especially in regards to opportunities, one of the things we looked at in the LCV study. We wanted to understand if the move towards electrification was focused on any particular types of vehicles. And we see that it actually touches on every type of light commercial vehicle, but in particular, pickup trucks and vans. And if we step back and look at all of the new entrants with electric vehicles, that tends to be the type of product that they're trending towards. But then there's another one that kind of stands out, and that's buses. We were able to look at particularly school buses in the LCV study, and they're going to electrification a lot faster than several other segments, at least on a percentage basis. And it makes sense because they're busy at the beginning of the day, then they can rest or charge, and then they're busy again at the end of the day. So it shouldn't come as a big surprise, but it did surprise us a bit to see how much school buses grow in electrification.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Mark?
Yeah, and I think too, just to kind of, second what James said with all the opportunity, I think of my previous life and, commercial vehicle industry for me is just so focused on, that Class 8, semi rolling down the road, but to see the overall growth, in the whole industry, whether it's that electric, truck that is now going to be part of someone's business, or now we're talking about the EV buses that you're seeing on college campuses and in cities, and then even talking now about how those Class 8s could potentially be electrified. It's in the midst of all the chaos of everything, it's just really cool and exciting to see the way the whole industry is growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, an industry that has been relatively stable and around for a long time, seeing this kind of innovation and transformation, and how quickly that in many ways they can adopt and happen, even faster than the passenger car space. So a lot to come. I think with that, I want to thank James, Mark, and Greg for joining me today. We'll be back with more Fuel for Thought next month. To opt into our newsletter that provides more information on this topic and others, as well as contact information for the colleagues that we spoke with today, please visit ihsmarket.com/auto newsletter.